Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the world of Kalyan. I'm Jose Kalyan, and today we are going to discuss a poem, My Mother at 66, by Kamala Das. My Mother at 66. Kamala Das was basically an Indian poet, a very popular Indian poet. Now let's see the poem from the beginning. Driving from my parents' home to Cochin last Friday morning, I saw my mother beside me doze, open-mouthed, her face ashen like that of a corpse, and realized with pain that she was as old as she looked, but soon put that thought away. Now let's see the first part. Driving from my parents' home to Cochin. The poet was driving to Cochin Airport from her ancestral home last Friday morning. She saw her mother doze. Doze means sleep lightly. Her old mother, who was 66, was beside her, next to her, and she was dozing, open-mouthed, with her mouth open, her face ashen like that of a corpse. Ashen means pale. Her face ashen like that of a corpse. You can see the use of simile, the poetic device simile here. The old mother's face. The old mother was dozing, open-mouthed, and her pale face, open-mouthed face, is compared to that of a corpse. Corpse means a dead body. So here the poetic device is simile. When she realized that her mother was very old and she would die soon, she would pass away soon, that realization gave her pain. So we continue. And realized with pain that she was as old as she looked, but soon put that thought away. As it was an unpleasant thought, the poet wanted to put that thought away. It's a kind of escapism. He wanted to run away from the fact, from the reality that her mother was really old and she would pass away soon. So she looked out and she saw young trees sprinting, and looked out at young trees sprinting, the merry children spilling out of their homes. She saw trees sprinting and merry children spilling out of their homes. So the poet was looking out from a moving car as the car was moving forward. When she looked at the trees, so it appeared that the trees were sprinting. Sprinting means running or moving fast. As she was looking out from a moving car, the trees seemed to be sprinting. Here the poetic device is personification. Trees, young trees sprinting. And you see merry children spilling out. The children coming out of, happy children coming out of their homes is compared to the spilling out of something. So it's a metaphor. The word like is not used or as is not used, but there's a comparison, implied comparison. So the poetic device is metaphor. So let's say the poet was driving to Cochin from her ancestral home on Friday morning, and she saw her mother sitting next to her, dozing. She was sleeping open-mouthed. And when she looked at her, she found that her mother's face, the poet's mother's face, was exactly like that of a corpse, ashen, pale like that of a corpse. And this sight gave her pain, and she realized with pain that her mother was old and any day she would die. And as it was an unpleasant thought, as that thought gave her pain, she wanted to put that thought away. For that, she looked out of the car and she saw young trees sprinting and merry children spilling out of their homes. But after the airport security check, standing a few yards away, I looked again at her, wan, pale as a late winter's moon. So the poet looked at her mother again. Though she looked out of the car window at the sprinting trees and the merry children spilling out. She couldn't be free from her fear. So she looked at her mother again and she found her mother's face, wan. Wan means colorless and pale as a late winter's moon. Here, mother's face is compared to a late winter's moon. Again, we see the poetic device simile. Then we should see why it's compared to a late winter's moon. Winter itself is symbolic of death, and here a winter's moon, as you can imagine, would be covered with mist or shrouded, and would not be bright. It would be dull. So the poet's mother's face was pale and dull like a late winter's moon. And she felt that old familiar ache. Ache means pain. She felt that old ache, the familiar ache. Why was it familiar? It was there since her childhood, my childhood's fear. So the poet says it was a childhood fear. Her childhood fear was her fear of separation, that one day she would be separated from her mother, and felt that familiar ache. It was a familiar ache for her. It was that pain was recurrent in her life. And as she was about to part her mother, she couldn't show her fear or her sad face. So all I said was, "See you soon, Amma." You see irony there. Standing next to her mother, all she said was, "See you soon, Amma." She was almost sure that she would not be able to see her mother alive again. But what she said was, "See you soon, Amma." That makes it an irony. And all I did was smile and smile and smile. You see the repetition of the word smile here. It is to reassure herself and her mother. It is to put up a brave friend in front of her mother. It is to hide her grief. So you see a vain effort in hiding her real feeling. So she's trying to put up a brave friend in front of her mother. She wanted to reassure herself and also to reassure her mother, and she wanted to hide her fear. Now, let's see how reference to context questions are asked from this poem. Let's see the first question. Where was the poet driving to? Who was sitting beside her? You know, the poet was driving to Cochin. As there's a reference to security check, we know that it's a Cochin airport. Who was sitting beside her? It was her mother. Then question B. What did the poet notice about her mother? Answer. Her mother was looking old and pale. Question C. Why did her mother's face look like that of a corpse? Why did her mother's face look like that of a corpse? The answer is obviously she was old, pale, and ashen. Since she had dozed off with her mouth open, the poet felt she looked like a corpse in that condition. Then question D. Find words from the passage which mean sleep lightly. You know the answer? The answer is doze. And 2. Dead body. Dead body, the word in the poem is corpse. Let's continue with the reference to context questions. Here we get a few more questions. Question A. What worried the poet when she looked at her mother? What worried the poet when she looked at her mother? Obviously the answer is fear of separation. Childhood fear that her mother was getting very old. The realization that her face looked ashen like that of a corpse and her mother would die very soon. Fear that she would be alone when her mother died. And the fear that it might be their last meeting. Why was there pain in her realization? Second question. Why was there pain in her realization? She couldn't reconcile herself to the thought of losing her mother. She would be left alone. Separation from her mother. Then there were obvious signs that her mother would pass away very soon. She was deeply attached to her mother. She had the childhood fear of losing her mother. can give any one of these value points. Then question C, why did she put that thought away? Why? Why did she put that thought away? It was an unpleasant thought, very painful thought, the thought of separation. Actually, it was a painful thought, an unpleasant thought. That's why she wanted to put that thought away. She was feeling uneasy and disturbed. She was going away from her mother, so she didn't want to carry the thought with her, a painful thought with her. And it was painful as a thought of separation. So any one of these you can give as the answer. Next question D. Identify the figure of speech used in these lines. You see the lines, her face ashen like that of a corpse. So it's simile. Simile is spelled S-I-M-I-L-E, not L-I-E or L-Y. It's L-E. And the question is identify. If the question is identify the figure of speech, after giving the pointer device, you have to say the words that help you to figure out what's the pointer device here, like that of a corpse. So you have to give those words in brackets, simile, and then like that of a corpse. Now we come across a few more questions. How can the trees sprint? The poet was looking out from a moving car. So the movement of the trees, the trees seem like moving. So that's why the poet presented the trees as sprinting. The poet was looking out of a moving car. B. Why did the poet look at her mother again? So it is to see her before departing, see her for the last time. Her feeling of anxiety and insecurity. It's because of her love for her mother. Yeah. And question C. What did she observe? She observed that her mother's face was pale and unhealthy, and she observed that her mother resembled the late winter's moon. Again, you see the question repeated and identify the figure of speech used in these lines. Simile, as I told you earlier, you have to say which words help you to identify the figure of speech. So you have to say as a late winter's moon. On this slide, you see the questions asked in 2019 for the compartment exam. First question, what did the poet notice about her mother? So she noticed that she had become old, she had aged. What were her feelings? So she felt agony, feelings of agony, pain, fear, anxiety, any one of this. Why did the poet put that thought away? As I explained to you earlier, it was an unpleasant thought. It gave her pain. So did not want to think of her mother's death, did not want to be separated from her mother, any one of this. Then identify the figure of speech. Simile, action like that of a corpse should be given in brackets. Here you see the question asked in 2019 March. Name the poem and the poet. Name the poet and the poem. Poem, My Mother at 66 and the poet Kamala Das. What was the poet's childhood fear? The fear of separation from her mother or losing her mother. What was the poetic device used in line 1 and 2? Pale as a late winter's moon, Simile. And if the question is identify, you have to show the words also as a late winter's moon. Explain late winter's moon. As I told you earlier, in winter the moon is dull and obscure and hazy, not shining. It's dim. So late winter's moon. There was another set where the same poem, there were questions from the same poem. The same poem was asked for reference to contest. With few changes in the question. Name the poem and the poet. It's the same, My Mother 66 by Kamala Das. What thought did the poet put away? The fear of separation from her mother, aging mother, and she's nearing her death. Why are the young trees described as sprinting? We saw that question earlier because the poet was in a moving car. Trees seem to be running into opposite direction. How do you know that The joyful scene did not help her drive away that thought from her mind. That's a good question. So the poet looked out of the car window to see the trees sprinting and merry children spilling out of their homes. But still, she was unable to put that thought away, drive away that thought. The question is, how do you know that? The joyful scene did not help her drive away that thought from her mind. At the security check, once again, the old fear of separation comes back to the poet's mind. That shows that she was not able to drive away that thought, that sad thought from her mind. And she tells us that it was an old and familiar ache. There's a question asked in 2019 March for 3 marks. From this year onwards, there won't be 3 marks questions. It will be 2 marks question, 30 to 40 words. What sort of pain does a poet feel in My Mother at 66? What sort of pain? What kind of pain? The pain of observing signs of aging in her mother, and remembers her childhood fear of separation from mother. It caused her pain, and should be careful about the word separation. It is separation. Sepa. So always be sure that you spell it correctly. Another 2 marks question. In the last line of the poem, My Mother 66, the word smile is repeated 3 times. What is its significance? It is to reassure herself and her mother. As I told you, it is to put up a brave friend in front of her mother and to tell her, to make her feel, to reassure herself and her mother, then to hide her true feelings from mother. And bidding mother farewell on a happy note, she wanted to bid farewell, say goodbye on a happy note. Yet another question asked in 2019 for 2 marks. Last year it was for 3 marks. From this year it's for 2 marks. What is the poet's childhood fear? Fear of losing her mother, fear of separation from her mother, fear of being left alone after mother's death. So you have to write all of these value points. And that is the end of the lesson, My Mother 66 by Kamala Das. Please subscribe this video and share it. Let it help your friends too. For any further query, feel free to mail at dosekalyan32@gmail.com. Bye.